Now that we have understood DS from a layman's perspective, let's start learning it from technical angle as well. We will start with the first type of data structure, that is an array. So, what is an array? The formal definition says that an array is a collection of similar type of element that have contiguous memory locations. Now let's try to understand it using a simple diagram. Let's say this is a memory in our computer. Now when we say memory, we mean RAM, which is nothing but random access memory. It is not our hard disk. Now we must be knowing that every cell in memory has a memory address. Typically it looks like this: 0, 9, X, F, 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 0. It can be anything. This is just for an example. So this particular cell's address can be say 09X FF0. Address of this cell, it might be say 08X AAA0 and so on. Now for simplicity, let's assume that the address of the cell starts with 0 and it increases by 1 as we go each cell towards right. So the address of the first cell becomes 0, it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Now when we declare a variable, we are typically given a cell to store our value. Say its address is 101. When we declare another variable, it might get stored in location say 3, 2, 6 and so on. Now let's imagine that we want to store 1000 numbers. Now if we start declaring 1000 variables, we have a problem, because first variable can go to location 101, second variable can go to location 326, third can go to location maybe say 469, which is somewhere here, and so on. Now in this case we have a problem. Problem is that we have to declare so many variables. It's tiring, as it will take a lot of our time, both to declare as well as to maintain those variables. So now that we have understood the problem of having multiple variables, let's try to understand if there can be an efficient solution to this problem. So one way we can solve this problem is we declare an array. Now let's get back to our memory diagram. Now what happens when we declare an array instead of lots of variables is that system allocates all the continuous blocks to us for storing our data. Now the advantage with this is that we need not declare 1000 variables. We can just declare one array with 1000 cells and we are done. Now let's get back to our diagram, which is this one. Now in the case of variables, we were able to access this memory location, but the problem was the access was random. That is, we had no way of saying to system that we want all the memory locations in one continuous memory location. So now if we want to access say this particular cell, in that case we can simply say that we want to access ARR array of say 1, or say if we want to access this particular cell, we say we want to access ARR array of cell number 2 and so on. So you see the advantage here, that we don't have to remember what are the variables that we have declared. We have just declared one array and within that we have multiple cells. It can be cells 1, 2, 3 and so on. So now that we have understood what is an array and why we need it, let's understand if an array can be multidimensional. Yes, an array can be multidimensional. It can be one-dimensional, it can be two-dimensional, it can be three-dimensional, it can be n-dimensional. Normally, we are most concerned about one-dimensional and two-dimensional. In your normal day-to-day work also, you are going to use the one-dimensional and two-dimensional only. Three-dimensional and more than that are hardly ever used. So we will focus mostly on one-dimensional and two-dimensional. So a one-dimensional array is one which has one row and multiple columns. It basically looks like this. So it has got only one row, but it has got multiple columns. This is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3, and so on. One important thing to note here is that the first cell in any array starts with 0 instead of 1. The next cell is 1, the next cell is 2, and so on. So this is an example of one-dimensional array. Now how does two-dimensional array looks like? So a two-dimensional array can have multiple rows and multiple columns. It will look very similar to this diagram. So I have row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, and I'll have multiple columns. Column 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this particular cell will be addressed by 0 row, 0 column. Say if we want to address this cell. So this is row number 1, column number 0, 1, 2, 3. So it will be addressed as 1, 3. Say we want to address this cell. So this is row number 0, 1, 2. So 2, column is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Column 4. I hope that the basic of array is clear by this time to all of you. Let's move on to the next topic. So the next topic is what are the nuts and bolts of array. So the first topic is declare or declaration of an array. So how do we declare an array? We say integer int space braces open braces closed ARR1. So when we say this, we mean we want an array whose name is ARR1. It should be an array type which is evident from this braces, and it should be of type integer. Now why the type integer? This we have to specify. We need this because we have to tell the compiler that what are the kind of values that we are going to store in this array. Say if we want to store in numbers like 9, 10, 11 and so on, we declare an array of type integer. Say if we want to store characters like A, B, C and so on, in that case we declare an array of type character, that is CHAR and so on. One important thing to note here is that when we declare an array, system does not allocate any memory location. So in this case, system has not allocated any memory. It only knows that there is an array called ARR1 which is of type integer and which we are going to use in future. Now the next part is create or creation of an array. Now, if we want system to create and allocate some memory for our array, which is ARR1, then we write it this way: ARR1 is equal to new int bracket open 10 bracket closed semicolon. When we say this statement, then system creates 10 cells and allocates that to us. When we say this statement, system creates an array of 10 cells. Now the next subtopic is initializing of an array. Notice that our array, which is ARR1, has been created, but no value has been assigned to any of the cells. By default, compiler gives 0 value to all the cells. So, for example, if we want to access cell number 4, then it will return a value of 0. Similarly for 7, 8, 9 and all of them. Now let's imagine that our requirement is that any given new array should have a default value of 20. In that case, we can declare our array like this. In this case, we have declared an array whose name is ARR1, which is of type integer, and an array which is denoted by open and closing brackets. We have given 3 values, that is 20, 20 and 20. That means system will create an array of 3 cells and default it with the value of 20 in each cells. Now the next topic is insert. Now say that we have this array ARR1 in which the second cell is having a value of 20 and we want to change it to 30. In that case, we say ARR1 of cell number 1 is equal to 30. Now the next topic is accessing a cell in an array. Imagine that we want to know the value of cell number 2 in this given array. So to access cell number 2, all that we have to do is we say ARR1 of 2 like this. Now that we have understood what is an array, why we need it, and what are the nuts and bolts of it, let's conclude the topic with pros and cons of using an array. As already said, the most important advantage of using an array is we don't need to declare multiple variables. The next advantage is that we can insert data in any given cell in constant time. That means that if we want to access cell number 1 million, we can access it in constant time and we don't need to traverse through all the 1 million cells in the array. Now there are certain disadvantages of using an array. So the first disadvantage of using an array is that inserting a value in a sorted array takes lot of time compared to list. Don't worry if you don't understand the meaning of list. As we progress with the course, it will become clear. The next big disadvantage of using an array is that it is of fixed size. What that means is that we always need to declare the size of an array when we are creating it, and it cannot be increased or decreased when we need it. With this slide, we conclude the basics of array.